Try again then. No, Mum, she fell.
Duran, what are you doing? What are you eating? Okay, we're going to try and get up the hill without falling into any holes. You going?
Yeah.
Ready? Go. Oh, your hat. I'll get it. Don't worry about your hat. I'm Nikki, and I have a daughter, 18-year-old daughter now, with Lafora disease. And she had her first symptoms at 14 and a half, where she fell down and had a generalized seizure. Before that, there wasn't really any signs. She was very smart in school, doing everything. So she was just a normal kid. I didn't even have to help her with homework and nothing. And then she fell down and had a seizure, which was very traumatic. We'd never seen a seizure before. You don't know what's going on. And then her hands kept shaking. She was trying to set the table with the glasses, and she just kept smashing all the glasses on the ground. And I'm like, what is going on?
I am Dr. Jordi Duran, and I am a researcher. My research is focused on studying how the brain works and why it deteriorates in certain diseases. One of the diseases I study is Lafora disease, a severe neurodegenerative condition that affects children and for which there is no effective treatment. It is one of the so-called rare diseases that affect a very small percentage of the population. I'm on my way to San Diego, where the International Congress of Lafora Disease is taking place, and where, once a year, experts of the disease, but also patients and relatives, come together with the aim of accelerating research to achieve a treatment.
La enfermedad de Lafora es una forma de epilepsia mioclónica y empieza, como muchas epilepsias mioclónicas, con sacudidas generalmente de los brazos. A veces estas sacudidas dan lugar a caída de objetos y después de unos meses, crisis convulsivas que llamamos generalizadas tónico-clónicas, que es la crisis que todo el mundo conoce, con caída al suelo, salida de saliva por la boca, convulsiones generalizadas, ojos en blanco, etc. Después de unos meses de este inicio, suele haber un deterioro cognitivo que los padres comunican como pues una caída en el rendimiento escolar.
So Lafora disease is a particularly terrible disease because these children develop normally until about age, let's say 14, more or less. And so imagine you have a child that's developing perfectly healthy, no problems, they're great at school, bright kids. And then gradually what happens, the child starts having myoclonic jerks, which are these jerk-like activities, and then they have a big seizure, and then they start having visual hallucinations. They start seeing things that are not really there. And these visual hallucinations are always scary. They're not even pleasant visual hallucinations. And then they have more and more seizures. Initially, the medications control the seizures, but then within a few years, the medications don't work. So the child is having very frequent seizures, and they have eventually a constant myoclonic state. They're constantly jerking, and their every thought is being interrupted. So they become very slow at answering a question. They try very hard, but every sentence and every thought is interrupted, and they have to pause, and it's an extremely frustrating feeling. Then they stop being able to eat, stop being able to walk, they develop dementia, and eventually they are bedridden and seizing all the time.
And so then they put her on epilepsy medication. And over the 9 months, they just weren't working. You know, they were increasing the medication. She still was having lots of seizures. And then one day at school, she was playing cards with her friends, you know, while it was raining in the library. And she couldn't follow the instructions. And her friends got upset and they threw the cards at her and she came home crying. And so I'm like, what drugs are they giving my child? So I called the doctor and I said, what are you doing? She can't even concentrate. She's too sedated. And they said, no, I think we need her to come into hospital and we do more tests. And then we got the diagnosis. The genetic test came back to say it is Lafora disease. It is terminal. There's no cure. And, you know, that within 10 years, she could pass away.
So overall, it's one of the most horrible diseases of any human condition and really, really in dire need of treatment. You know, some diseases are so bad that the patient will die. And, you know, it's sad, but, you know, there's relief. Here, there's 10 years of torture, you know, and you can't do anything about it. The medications don't work, and pure suffering for the patient, the parents, the siblings, the community. I really think that this is one of the worst diseases of any kind in pediatrics and in young people in general.
Por ejemplo, algunos tumores como el glioblastoma multiforme también son enfermedades muy, muy graves. Pero yo creo que la característica fundamental de la enfermedad de Lafora es la aparición en niños sanos que han tenido una vida normal y que empiezan alrededor de los 12 años con un deterioro muy rápido y que les lleva a la muerte en unos años. O sea, que son niños que están empezando a vivir, ¿no?, la vida, digamos, ya madura y que pues se quedan sin ella.
My name is Jennifer Merriam and I have 2 children with Lafora body disease. Anissa is 24 years old and Tylen is 16 years old.
I loved it. I loved it much. Oh man, this is really big. My dearest Izzy, where do I begin? We've done so many amazing events together, concerts to vacations. You have always been there for me from the beginning till the end.
So Anissa was 14 years old when she started dropping things and having myoclonus, and she was diagnosed with Lafora body disease in December of 2016. And I remember sitting there and they told us there is no cure for this, there's no treatments. We asked, are there any clinical trials, anything? As her dad and I sat there and they said, no, there's nothing you can do. You have 10 years. Basically go home and give her the best life you can give her, is what I was told.
And, you know, no one wants to hear that their child is dying, you know, or is going to die, but not that it's a long suffering. I mean, I know 10 years is short, but it's the suffering that is the hardest. It doesn't stop. Every day they're having symptoms.
It's like a slow death. You know, you sit and you're watching them every day. I always tell myself, this is the best she's going to be, because tomorrow she's going to be a little bit less. Something else in her body is going to be affected, her cognition. You know, will she still be walking tomorrow? Will she still be talking?
So over 10 years of pure torture. Meanwhile, the family has had other children, and these younger children know that they are at risk of having the same problem.
So we had the other 2 children tested, and so Mariah ended up that she didn't have the disease at all, and then Ty ended up that, you know, I was called and told he has this disease. So it is horrifying to hear it once. And to hear it a second time is like, you know, 2 of your 3 kids have been given a death sentence, pretty much.
And the fact that my brother has this is devastating, but at least we know that it's happening. So if, you know, there's a moment when I want to get frustrated with him as a sibling, as a sister does, I remind myself that I might not have those moments in the future.
It's like they're lost, and it's very hard to see, when you know how intelligent that child was. And you as a parent, you don't want to bury your child. You should go first, not your child. And it just hurts every day to see her change.
Do you find it hard to sing?
Nah.
No. What about dance?
Nah.
How about reading?
Reading,
Do you find that hard?
writing, going up the stairs by yourself? Is that hard?
I can walk
Yep. You can.
down, up this.
Yep.
A disease is considered a rare disease when it affects less than 1 in every 2,000 people. The prevalence of Lafora disease is even much smaller.
Because it's such a rare disease, it's hard to estimate. In the United States, where the population is generally very mixed, we have less patients than in certain countries in Europe or other places. So in the United States, I think that we have about 1 in a million.
Ahora mismo en España habrá 8 pacientes con la enfermedad. O sea, es una enfermedad no rara, sino ultra rara. Porque estamos diciendo que la incidencia anual sería de un caso nuevo por pues cada 40, 50 millones al año.
As they affect few patients, rare diseases are very unknown. Patients' associations play a very important role for patients with rare diseases and their families.
So when you're thinking about a rare disease and trying to come up with a cure, there's a number of different parties that have to collaborate to make that happen. You've of course got the patients, and they're the ones that everyone's trying to help. You've got the families of the patients, and those families oftentimes coalesce together to form an organization. And in our case, for Lafora's disease, the name of that organization is Chelsea's Hope. Chelsea was a young woman who died in her early 20s, and her mother really drove the idea of forming an organization focused on finding a cure for Lafora's disease.
So there's a lot of suffering, but the patient community, I got in contact with Chelsea's Hope, Lafora Children Fund, and said, please help, what advice can you give? And they put us in touch with the right doctors and researchers around the world, and they've all been so closely connected with us, and we've become connected with all the patient families around the world as well. And at first I didn't want to talk to other families. You're so upset, and I don't know if it's denial or you're offended that your child has a disease, but that has been the best therapy, to talk to other families that understand, because their symptoms are so big that not everyone understands, even your own immediate family, the impact that it has on the house.
For example, just this morning, being able to sit down with moms from Italy and look across the table, and although there's a little bit of a language barrier, I know in my heart what they're going through every single day, and they know me, and we sit across the table and we're like, you're like a sister to me, even though I don't know who you are, you're like my sister, we're like family, because we're experiencing this horrific journey together.
Stops the accumulation of the father and the accumulation of aggregates, and the ones that both to details that are stopping
Lafora disease does not care about the pandemic. It doesn't care about an adverse funding decision. It doesn't care about a pharma management decision. It doesn't care about insurance problems or national borders or anything like that. Lafora disease is relentless. Every day, you people get to go to work and try to save lives. And that is precisely what we need you to do.
The barriers we find is funding. Because it's so ultra rare, there's no return on an investment for pharmaceutical companies, for whoever needs to make a profit. Every month, these children change. They get worse and worse. And it's like, oh, we can do it next year or the year after. These children aren't going to be alive next year or the year after. We need it now. The urgency is now that we need therapies trialed in these children.
The rare diseases don't get any funding. Well, it's unfortunate because we have so much money for so many other things that are important. But all those people, all the children, anyone around the world who has an ultra rare disease, or even a rare disease, the importance of funding isn't there, and we need to make it important, and we need to make it a priority so that we can give these kids some hope, and that we can save these children and not give them a death sentence.
I think the world needs to know that, small patient communities need help, need funding.
And so an idea that was really catalyzed and brought about by the patient families was, why don't these scientists work together? And the idea at the end of the meeting, one of the dads, he stood up and he said, look guys, I'm gonna pull the dad card here. My kid died of this disease. You guys have to get along, and you have to share data, and you have to do it faster, because more kids are gonna die. And so, at that point, no one in the room could really talk, number one, because of the emotions that brought up, and no one could disagree.
And because this is a rare disease, few labs work on it. And each of the labs have certain strengths and certain capabilities, but each one is not enough to solve the problem. And given that the problem concerns children who are going to suffer and die, there is no reason, there's no option other than to come together, because the whole is greater than the sum of the pieces. What we bring to each other in our discussions turns on, lamps in our head and show us things that, because when you look at something from your eyes, you may miss something. Someone else looks with their eyes and puts a new light on the problem, and together you can solve the problems.
The patient advocacy group brought us all together and pushed us on this idea of collaborating and being able to share data more openly and more freely. So the collaborative portion is critical for this. I think this disease shows why collaboration is key.
So it's so important. It's so important that the researchers are coming together like they are, and I'm so thankful for the collaboration that happens with all of our researchers and the doctors and other clinicians in biotech. Everything that's coming together, the pharmaceutical, to work together to try to find some treatments for our children. We need treatments, and we needed them yesterday. So I think sometimes we say we needed them today. No, we needed them yesterday, because there are so many children who have already gone.
And just talking to the researchers and the doctors, and I found that they're so in touch with the community. They do so much. And they care, and I was very surprised, because I didn't understand the medical world at all. I was just getting on with my life, working, my children are at school, and then you get thrown into the medical field, and I have such a sense of appreciation for researchers and for doctors, even nurses, what they do every day and how much they care. It's not just a job. And they are fighting for a cure for our children. And I appreciate that so much, because, they don't have to care for my child, but they do. And coming here for the Lafora Symposium and meeting everyone that cares so much about my child and the children of Lafora is just, it's very overwhelming and emotional, and it gives us hope.
Lafora disease is named after Dr. Gonzalo Rodriguez Lafora, who first described it at the beginning of the last century.
Gonzalo Rodriguez Lafora, using quite simple tools, he was a student of Ramon Cajal, and he had these patients that had epilepsy and dementia at a very young age, and when they died, during autopsy, he examined the tissues, and he drew by hand pictures of what he saw. He described the disease in terms of what the patient is exhibiting close to their death, this idea that they're undergoing horrendous episodes of epilepsy, dementia, much like we see in Alzheimer's disease, but they're doing this in their early 20s. So you've got a very young person that is undergoing these horrendous events, and then once those patients died, he looked under the microscope at tissues and observed these hallmarks, these aggregations that shouldn't be there. And he said, you know what, when I look at these, Lafora described them and said, these are aggregates that shouldn't be in the brain.
Dr. Lafora was a disciple of Dr. Santiago Ramon y Cajal, Nobel Prize in Medicine and the father of modern neuroscience. Lafora and Cajal did their research with very simple tools, the only ones available at that time. With very rudimentary microscopes and drawing by hand what they saw when analyzing brains, they described the functioning of the nervous system and studied diseases that affect it. Today, we have much more advanced tools that allow us to better study the brain and neurodegenerative diseases.
Nosaltres, clar, som discípuls de Cajal, és a dir, som patòlegs o som histopatòlegs que estudiem malalties humanes. Volem saber els mecanismes i volem estudiar nous tractaments. Nosaltres fem des de les tècniques bàsiques que feia Cajal, diguem, de la tinció bàsica, que és la metoxilina i iosina, fins a, avui en dia, tècniques molt més sofisticades. Nosaltres tenim les imatges ja no només a un microscopi òptic convencional, sinó que els escanegem, podem aquestes imatges en els investigadors o nosaltres després els guardem i a partir d'allí, amb uns softwares que hi ha avui en dia d'anàlisis, podem arribar a una quantificació, percebre exactament a cada teixit quin número de cèl·lules i quin tipus hi ha segons el que hi ha marcat en diferents anticossos o en diferents tècniques. I això avui en dia es fa perquè tenim els equips, o sigui, treballem de forma automatitzada, és a dir, totes aquestes immunotincions es fan automatitzades amb uns equips que són molt cars, amb un personal que té que estar constantment formant-se, perquè això requereix estar al dia i els centres de recerca han de ser pioners amb tot això. Però per poder fer tot això, és clar, necessitem un suport i és molt costós un suport econòmic darrere que necessita la recerca. I sobretot amb aquestes malalties minoritàries, com l'Lafora o com altres que també treballem, perquè hi ha menys diners també per aquestes malalties que no les que tots coneixem, com poden ser la inflamació, càncer, etc.
Un aspecte interessant a donar-se'n és que mentre que la malaltia la va descriure el doctor Lafora a començaments del segle XX, han hagut de passar més de 100 anys perquè poguéssim arribar a entendre quines eren les bases moleculars, quin era el defecte que realment causava aquesta malaltia tan terrible. Això va ser possible només quan hi va haver prou avanç de la ciència i de la tecnologia com per disposar de materials i de maneres d'abordar d'una forma científica la comprensió d'una malaltia com aquesta. Una altra característica interessant de l'estudi de la malaltia de Lafora és que les solucions que es proposen poden servir també per curar i per trobar tractament per a altres malalties relacionades. I a més també han incrementat el nostre coneixement bàsic sobre els mecanismes cel·lulars. És dir, és clar que l'estudi de les malalties minoritàries no solament té un interès específic per a aquella malaltia en qüestió, sinó que transcendeix molt més enllà i ens incrementa el nostre coneixement sobre les bases moleculars de la vida i pot arribar a trobar solucions per a altres malalties que inicialment no s'esperava. La malaltia de Lafora està a mig camí. Entenem quines les causes que té, entenem quin és el problema i estem buscant les solucions. Però per trobar-les cal encara molta més inversió, amb diners, amb temps, amb capital humà, i que les millors ments de la nostra generació es posin a la feina i puguin intentar atacar aquest problema amb les ganes de resoldre.
Un cop descobert què és el que falla en una cèl·lula i quin és el medicament necessari per aconseguir que aquesta cèl·lula passi d'una acció que no és normal a tornar a actuar de manera sana, el que hem de fer és dirigir els fàrmacs cap a aquestes cèl·lules en concret. En malalties que afecten el cervell, això és encara un problema molt més gros, perquè el cervell és un òrgan molt sensible del nostre cos, un òrgan molt delicat. Per tant, el cervell està molt protegit amb una barrera extra, una barrera física, que impedeix que qualsevol substància en general hi passi. Haurem d'aconseguir travessar aquesta barrera i això és una dificultat afegida, una dificultat que fa que molts medicaments per malalties neuronals encara no hagin arribat al mercat. Amb la medicina moderna i aplicant les noves innovacions que han aparegut en diferents camps com la nanomedicina, podem millorar, podem aconseguir dirigir els fàrmacs a les cèl·lules que volem. I això és especialment important en malalties que afecten el sistema nerviós central, el cervell, com per exemple la malaltia de Lafora. Però encara no hem arribat a l'èxit per totes les malalties. De fet, en el cas en concret que estem parlant de malalties neuronals, cal moltíssima més recerca.
I això jo diria que ens fa passar-nos molt del nostre temps aixecant diners, buscant finançament per aconseguir arribar a allò que tots volem, no? Que aquests malalts de malalties minoritàries, normalment pediàtriques, normalment infants, puguin arribar a assolir una cura que moltes vegades destrossa a les famílies per impotència de no poder fer res. L'èxit és curar aquestes malalties. No és l'èxit d'un grup de recerca, no és el prestigi de tenir un article de més impacte i això obliga a treballar també amb generositat. Generositat per donar el millor que tens, generositat per no voler ser el primer en sortir a la foto, generositat perquè els centres de recerca es coordinin i realment puguin afrontar aquests tipus de projectes que són, diguem, de tant mida, tant magnitud, que dificulten fer-los una persona sola.
Today, Ange? Where are we going? Where are we going today? Hi, Ange. You at the hospital?
Thanks to research, Angelina is the first patient in the world to have begun to receive an experimental treatment for Lafora disease. We still don't know the extent to which it will be effective, and we need to do much more research to improve this treatment and develop others. Lafora disease is just one example of the many rare diseases that affect millions of people worldwide. For all of them, we must keep fighting the rare.